What's up, my good peoples? Welcome to the Be Transformed podcast, where we're talking about ideas that stimulate wholesome thinking into identity, purpose, vision, and action. I am James Anderson, and today we're listening to a message from our BT community group. This is a group that meets online twice a month. All these talks can be found on our website at teambtransformed.com, and you go into the menu section and you look up community group. This message is about creating momentum in life. So without further ado, let's get into it. So for today, I want to talk a little bit about creating momentum in life. Sometimes, we get into some new seasons. There's some new chapters in life, and where, you've got some vision for something new. It's just kind of another chapter in the pathway of creating vision and realizing your vision. And sometimes the things that God is calling us into, sometimes they're the most, whatever God's calling us into is beautiful. But sometimes the things He's calling us into really have a little conflict with our paradigm, right? Sometimes the things He's calling us into require that we change some of the way we think. And sometimes the things He's calling us into can be quite uncomfortable. And this is all very good things, because we know that there is no comfort in growth and no growth in comfort. So, when things are uncomfortable, we know that that's an indicator, that can be an indicator anyways, that we're going in the right direction, right? When things feel a little bit challenging, a little bit scary, a little bit unnerving, that's something that's pulling us towards growth. And so that's what we're going to look at today. Having momentum in life is beautiful. So momentum, just get myself sorted out here. Momentum is the strength and force that is created through movement. And momentum is a very powerful thing. So momentum is something that's created through consistent and persistent movement over time. Momentum is what it is. Like, when I think about what is momentum in life, what does it mean to have momentum in your business, in your family dynamics, in whatever things you're trying to pursue in life. Momentum is really it's confidence and faith that is built through experience. So it's like, when I've got these past experiences of I had some vision, I wanted to create some things, and I took action, I got after it, I embraced the discomfort, and good things were the outcome. Those experiences help propel you forward, right? They help solidify and create a solid evidence that you're going in the right direction. And that momentum actually helps push you out of your comfort zone into new territory. So like, maybe, if we're doing Boda, and we know, bam, we're out there, we're making things happen. We've kind of got a regular pattern, but we're like, man, I would love to double my sales, right? This is a beautiful target. And, we're like, okay, well, what we need to do to double our sales is we need to build our reoccurring customers. And so what that means then is you have to take a proactive approach to communicate with people, to try to sell them on the idea of, you being the person that can take them to work every day and pick them up and drive them home. And so, maybe that's a little bit scary, but you go for it anyways. Maybe you get a couple no's, but you work through it and you get a yes, right? That's an experience. That's something that is creating that momentum. That momentum is the thing that's behind you, that's pushing you forward. When you have momentum, when I think about momentum, I think about a big old train. You've got this train on this track, and you've got the engine, and then you have all these cars behind it. And these cars are full of stuff, right? So here's this locomotive, this engine that has got to pull this massive load. And when you're trying to take something that's got this big old load, and you're trying to take it from a dead stop and get it moving, there is an immense amount of energy, power, and torque that is required to move that load. When the things that God's calling us into are unfamiliar, a little bit scary. It's like, you're trying to move this big load. You're trying to take new actions that are beyond your comfort zone. And it can feel like you're trying to pull this load. It's each step kind of feels kind of heavy and scary. Well, when you're trying to gain momentum, the smallest obstacles will bring you to a screeching halt, right? Like you're trying to get this big old thing to move, and there's a little pebble in the way. Boom. There wasn't enough momentum to get you past that pebble, and so that pebble brings the whole thing to a screeching halt. All that effort, all that trial, maybe you want to create better relationships, with your spouse, and you're talking about some vision you have, and it's not really, there's not really conversations that you normally have, and it's not received very well. And there's a lot of fear and a lot of doubt that you get back when you're saying, hey man, we could do this and create this. And the other person's like, no, that's never going to work. That's stupid. And, it took some guts to bring that conversation up, and bam, you were hit with some resistance. That creates, that screeching halt, and it can become hard to want to begin again. But the thing is that when you have momentum, when you've got that strength and force, when you've got that movement and that train is getting up to speed, well, it's easier to handle problems. It's easier to handle these different obstacles because you have this power behind you. And it's challenging to create momentum, but man, it's vitally necessary. But we're going to kind of look at just the reality of trying to build that momentum. Because whatever these things are that God is calling us into individually, it's this next seasons, it's going to be a little bit beyond your comfort zone, which is amazing, because this is where God wants us, and where He wants us demands that we become more, and that our mind shifts more, and we develop skills and confidence in greater degrees in new areas. And so this is kind of the topic that we're looking at today. So the first thing that we need when we're trying to create momentum in life is we need to pick a direction, right? We need to have a target. Maybe you want to double your sales, right? Maybe you want to build that relationship with your spouse where you're both on the same page of moving on purpose. Maybe you want to build a better relationship with your kids, whatever it is. You got to pick a direction. If we want to create momentum in life, it's only going to be because we're trying to get somewhere. So once we pick a direction, right? Once we kind of see, okay, here's where God's calling us into in this next season. then we need to think about it correctly. So you guys might remember this. Some time ago, we read a chapter out of the book As a Man Thinketh. It was called Thought and Purpose. And here's just like 2 paragraphs out of that section. So it says, having conceived of a purpose, a man or woman should mentally mark out a straight pathway to its achievement, looking neither to the right nor to the left, right? So once we've kind of seen the direction we're meant to go, once we've picked, okay, here's my new target, here's my new goal, here's where we're going to focus here in this next, beginning of the year. You gotta pick a direction, but then we want to make somewhat of a plan, right? Like, okay, here's my target, here's the thing I want to create. Well, what do I actually need to do to create that? You don't need to come out with some massive year-long plan, but it's like, what are the first few steps that we need to take to be able to create this, to be able to step into this new thing that God's calling us into, right? He says, when you're doing this, you need to look neither to the right or to the left. He says, doubts and fears should be rigorously excluded. He says they are disintegrating elements which break up the straight line of effort, rendering it crooked, ineffectual, and useless. So he says doubts and fears need to be rigorously excluded. Rigorously means like with some effort. They got to be excluded, right? Like not invited to the party. That means you have to take like conscious effort to really recognize when your mind might be going sideways. And he's like, you got to take conscious effort to stop those thoughts because they're disintegrating elements. So if you think about, okay, here's the vision, here's the thing God's calling us into, especially something that's scary, especially something that's like challenges your paradigm. It's really easy to lose sight of that vision. It's easy to lose sight of the motivation or even the confidence of the direction. When it's something that challenges your paradigm, where you have to keep going back and going back and going back, and you're seeking. You're like, God, dude, is like you. What is your perspective? Like, I was good to go yesterday. Today, I don't even know if this was the right direction, right? Like, you have to keep going back. It's a very interesting process. But the trick with doubts and fears is that they seek to disintegrate your pathway and your effort, right? It's like I'm trying to create this momentum. I'm moving forward, and then bam, I get a little doubt, little fear, and I stop and I forget where I'm going. He's like, you gotta rigorously exclude them, because not only do when they disintegrate the pathway that you're chasing, it's like it breaks up the straight line of effort, rendering it crooked, ineffectual, and useless, right? So we're no longer going straight. Now we're taking a left, or we're taking a right, or we're taking a U-turn. We're like, no, wait, let's get this. This is not even the right direction. And we start going backwards. He says, thoughts of doubt and fear never accomplish anything and never can. Doubt and fear are not ingredients for action. They're ingredients for inaction, right? They become excuses to justify not taking action, right? He says they always lead to failure. Purpose, energy, power to do, and all strong thoughts cease when doubt and fear creep in. So if you think about all the energy that it takes to get moving disappears when we start marinating on doubts and fears, right? When we start picturing the future failing, we start picturing taking these next steps, which are uncomfortable, but we start to see them fail. We start to see them not work out. We start to, you picture yourself taking a risk and then looking stupid. And it's all just in our imagination. But he's like, when we start marinating on that and we start believing those imaginary futures that are not desirable, it takes away all the energy of action. But if you flip that, right, it's like, purpose creates energy. It creates the power to do, and it creates strong thoughts. So when we're looking straight ahead at the vision and at the goal, and if we can just take the first step and then the next step, we can start to begin to create momentum. But if we marinate too long in the price, oh, that's uncomfortable. Ooh, that's beyond my comfort zone. If we start to marinate too much on the price and picturing taking action and failing, is going to prevent us from wanting to take any kind of action. So he says the will to do springs from the knowledge that we can do. Right? Recognizing this purpose and recognizing that this is the thing that God is calling us into, right? The will to do springs from the knowledge that we can do. So when we are seeing the thing that God's calling us into, and we're seeing the possibility and the actual pathway to its attainment, it creates the motivation to take action. But doubt and fear are the great enemies to this knowledge. Right? It's like, oh, well, it's probably not possible. Yeah, that's a nice idea. Oh, the vision is beautiful and it even seems possible, but I can't get past this thing. It's probably never going to work out anyways, right? Doubt and fear are the great enemies to this knowledge. And he who encourages them doubts and fears, who does not slay them, thwarts himself at every step, right? Every time we picture taking a new step or whatever, if every time we picture that thing being too big, too scary, and impossible, it's like we come up with a justification of why not to take action. And this is what it looks like, man. When God is calling us into something that is beyond our paradigm, it's beyond our current results, but it's like it's something big and beautiful that he's calling us into. But it's like, woo, you got to watch out for that fear and doubt. So in Proverbs 4:25-27, it says, look straight ahead. Fix your eyes on what lies before you. Mark out a straight path for your feet. Stay on the safe path. Don't get sidetracked. Keep your feet from following evil, right? This proverb is what inspired those two paragraphs from Thought and Purpose. So, vision, right? Here's the safe path. Here's us. Here's vision. All we're doing is looking straight ahead at the very thing that we are seeking to obtain. Looking to the right or to the left, right? This is where there's the ingredients for negative imaginings, right? So the negative daydreams. You're picturing the future. You're picturing taking these steps, but it failing, right? This is where your doubts and your fears are hanging out. This is like we're considering the price tag of effort too much. Instead of here's the vision, here's the next step, let's take that next step. And so he says, look straight ahead. Don't look to the right. Don't look to the left. Don't get sidetracked. Don't get distracted. Don't waste time and emotional energy. Look at where it is we're going. And it's like, I dare you to take that first step. So, when we're looking again at Israel coming out of Egypt and going to the promised land. And it's interesting. because the vision that God had for these people was beyond their paradigm. The vision God had, the thing that he was calling Israel into was glorious. It was beautiful and epic. We're going from slavery to having like our own nation with epic, abundant land and everything glorious. But as in all things, the things that God's calling us into require effort. They require work. And it requires a certain kind of mentality. And so it's interesting. So in Exodus 13, 17 through 18, it says, "And then it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines. Although it was near, although it was closer," right? It would have been a faster pathway to go through the land of the Philistines. But God did not take them through there. He says, "For God said, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt." Now, this is interesting. There was a shorter pathway and it was through the land of the Philistines. But God's like, well, we can't go there because if they see war, they're going to return to Egypt. It's not that God couldn't take them through that war. It was that they didn't have the mentality or the identity built up enough to face that. So he was like, they're going to run back to Egypt. So we can't do it. But here's the funny thing, is that actually the promised land was this gift. He's like, I'm giving you this land. However, you have to dispossess the people. You are straight up going to have to go to war. So he's saying right now, I can't take them through this land because they're going to end up in war and it's going to be too much. But they are going to have to develop the mentality and identity to be able to go to war when they get to the promised land, to actually dispossess the people, to be able to possess the land. So here's this vision, which is big and beautiful, but these people are not quite developed enough to be able to obtain it. So we got to go through this process of creating momentum. We got to go through this process where we're discovering who God really is and who we really are, so that we can become the people who actually have the mentality and the identity to actually correctly interpret the next step that's going to take us into the vision. So it's interesting because Israel had the potential. Potential is what we could be. It's that seed laying dormant, right? What we all are right now is the potential that we've all realized. But what is inside of us is what we still have the ability to become. And as long as you're breathing, man, you are packed full with potential. You don't ever run out. And Israel had the potential to handle the challenge, but they didn't have the mentality. They had the potential, but they didn't have the identity. So this challenge, which is a challenge they are going to have to embrace later on, they actually can't handle right now. It's too heavy. But the mission is like, all right, well, remember we said with vision, there's where we are, and then there's like the fulfillment of the vision. That space in between is called the development process. And so this is the process that Israel needed to go through. Whenever I think about the development process, I'm always reminded of the parable of the talents. And so, it's the master gathers up his servants and he gives each servant an amount of money according to their ability. According to their ability. So one he gives 5, one he gives 2, and one he gives 1. The amount of resource that you are given is not an insult. It's an invitation. You could look, it's like, okay, I got 1 talent, but hey, this guy's got 5. It's like I could sit around and I could wish that I had more. But it's like That's not how you actually grow and develop. A lot of times, people are like, well, if I just had more, I could become more. But no, it's like the BT definition of management, which management is a massive part in the pathway of growth and development. So management is the effective use of your current resources to create value, growth, and expansion. Oftentimes, people want to overlook the one talent and dream about what they would do if they had 4 talents. The problem with that is we're overlooking the one we have and therefore never doing anything with it. Therefore, we're never becoming the people who could actually handle and manage the 4 talents. So what we have to do is we have to recognize what we have, and then we got to freaking put it to work. We got to use it. We got to grow it. Because look at this exponential growth. If we take 1 talent and we turn it into 2, then we take 2 talents and we turn it into 4. And then we take 4 talents and we turn it into 8. All right, those aren't very big numbers, but you go from 8 and you turn that into 16, and you turn 16 into 32, right? And if I was better at multiplication, that number could actually increase. And that's just my 2s. That's only your times 2. If I knew my times 3s, guys, we'd be really making things happen. But the thing is that we have to be able to take what we have and we got to turn it into more. This is the mission. And this is the thing that's preparing us for the future. Here's where I am, here's the bigger vision. And in between all that is this process called development. This is huge and this is important. And I'll show you why. So we read in Exodus 13 that God was like, hey, we're not going to go through the land of the Philistines because if we do, they're going to see war and they're going to go back to Egypt. Okay, in Numbers 13, all right, this is 2 books later. All right, so this is, give or take 2 years-ish, give or take. 2 books later, we're now close to the promised land, and God tells Moses, hey, take 1 leader from each tribe and send those 12 people into the promised land to spy it out and come back and give a report. So they do. They spend 40 days checking it out. And so they come back, and that's where we're at here in Numbers 13, 26 through the end. So it says, now they departed, the spies departed from the land and came back to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel in the wilderness of Paran in Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land, right? They had 1 cluster of grapes on a stick between 2 people because it was that big. So they brought back some of the fruit of the land, and they told them and said, we went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit, right? Showing that cluster of grapes. They brought back some pomegranates. They're like legit. Here's the evidence. The vision that God has for us is indeed beautiful. Nevertheless, forget about it. The people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak, right? The giants. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and Amorites dwell in the mountains. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it. I don't know what it is, but the people who tend to not have anything worthwhile to say feel the most urgency to say it. These guys get there, they're like, listen, man, yes, the land's legit, but forget about it. Forget about it. Forget about it. It's too scary. They're too big. We're too small. Forget about it. Caleb's like, shut it. Let's take it. Let's go. Let's go. Like, he is ready. He's like, man, we have been journeying. Let's freaking go get after it and get this very thing that God is calling us into. He says, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against this people. This is when you're taking your eyes off the vision and you're looking to the right and to the left. These guys have been on the journey back, and they have been marinating on all the reasons why it is not possible. And now this is what is fresh and ripe in their mind, and this is all the stuff that they are bringing to the congregation. Moses and Aaron should have took the 12 spies and debriefed them in a separate area apart from the masses, but they didn't. And so now Moses has no control over what is happening. And there is this whole realm of negativity that these guys are selling, and the congregation is buying it. So Caleb's like, no, let's go after it. And these guys are like, forget about it. We are not able to go up against this people. This is the report. These guys went out, spied out the land to bring back some strategy, some insight, and all they have is it's not possible. He says they are stronger than we are. And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land, which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone, as spied, is a land that devours its inhabitants. Dude, 2 paragraphs above it says, it truly flows with milk and honey. Now, dude, they flipped a switch. And they were like, listen, the land freaking devours the inhabitants. That's what? That's the totally different definition of what they just saw. And all the people who we saw are men of great stature. They must have been looking at me. And he says, and they saw the giants, right? The descendants of Anak. And now check this out. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sight. This was the problem. He says, the people were huge, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight. You know, you got a human being and a tiny little grasshopper. You could step on it and get about your day and not worry about it. These guys' identity from Exodus, Leviticus, unto Numbers didn't change, at least not for the masses. And so they get to the place where they have been called to, where God's vision for them is, and their identity isn't right, and therefore they don't view it correctly. We were like grasshoppers in our own sight. Caleb said, dude, let's go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it. Not just a little bit. I mean, we can do it. This was a different identity. So then it continues in Numbers 14, and it says, so all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night, right? I mean, this is the report. People are coming back, and they're saying, forget about it. It's not possible. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, now here we go. Here we go. They go back into their default mode. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, the whole congregation, because Moses and Aaron didn't debrief these guys separately, these guys who felt so motivated to share how not possible it was, has caused the entire congregation to go down a pathway that was incorrect. So the whole congregation complains against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in the wilderness. What they're saying is, as long as we would have died yesterday, I don't want to die today, and I certainly don't want to die tomorrow, but if I would have already been dead, this would have been better. This has been, when they got to the wilderness and it was hard, they're like, it would have been better if we would have died in Egypt. Now they're entering into a new season where they're trying to get into the promised land. They're like, well, it would have been great if we would have died in Egypt, or it would have been great if we died in the wilderness, because at least that was yesterday. But nobody wants to die today or tomorrow. It would have been better if we would have died then. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword? That's hardcore to the right and to the left, right? That we're no longer remembering why God brought us out here. Why has God brought us out here just to fall by the sword? That our wives and our children should become victims. Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us select a leader and return to Egypt. This is the first time that they straight up tried to go back to Egypt. What you have sometimes when you're stepping into something new that's uncomfortable, you can end up with what's called the terror barrier. The terror barrier is this imaginary wall. It's like a barrier, and it's terrifying. It's like it's not even rational that it's so scary. It's just it's in your mind because it's challenging your paradigm that it's like so scary. They hit that barrier and they bounced off and are trying to run back to Egypt. Like this is the hardest they've ever hit that thing, right? Everything's been challenging. They're like, we should just go back. This was like terrifying because everything God did in the wilderness, they really didn't have to do anything. God just took care of it. But this, they were actually going to have to participate in the process, which is what the promised land is all about. It's about work. It's about responsibility. It's about management. And it is about everything that we are created to get into. But they hit this terror barrier and they're like, let's return to Egypt. They said, let us select a leader and return to Egypt, which is funny because you could go anywhere. Why would you go back to Egypt? It was because it was the only thing they had ever known. They couldn't even think beyond it. So Moses and Aaron, it says, fall on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the church. So Moses and Aaron just hit the deck, man. They're like, holy cow, this has gone really bad. And we're talking about the whole horde of Israel, like pissed and ready to go. But Joshua and Caleb, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. And they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, the land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, right? If after all this craziness, the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Listen to this. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Okay, so the other guys were like, we saw these big people. They were crazy. They were scary. And we were like grasshoppers in our own eyes. This was identity crisis. Joshua and Caleb, this is their perspective. They're like, listen, the people of this land, their protection has departed. If God is calling us into this, that means he ain't with them. They have nothing that will be able to withstand what God wants to do. All we have to do is go get after it. This is a totally different perspective than the rest of the people have. So much so that in verse 10, it says, all the congregation said to stone them with stones. They're like, shut up with all this we can do it business. Let's kill these fools and let's go back to Egypt. Woo! See, it's interesting, right? So coming out of Egypt, God was like, we can't go to the Philistines because if we go to war, they're going to want to go back to Egypt. But we knew we had to go to war, so that meant that through this process, we needed to have some development and some growth, right? And this happened for Joshua and Caleb, but it did not happen for anybody else. So, they come out of Egypt. Okay, this is an experience, right? They just had all the plagues. They just looted all of Egypt, right? God told them to go to their neighbors, ask them for their clothes, their jewelry, whatever. And they did, and Egypt gave them everything they had. And they straight up, with all their animals, came out of Egypt like with wealth. All right. Then they get to the Red Sea, right? And this was a challenge, and they freaked out. And that's whatever. That's just part of the process. And they made it through, and God kills the Egyptian army. Okay, so here's the next step, right? Here's how we create momentum. Remember, momentum was it's that faith and that confidence that's produced through experience. So if they would have got, right, when they got to the body of water where it was bitter and you couldn't drink it, if they would have looked back and be like, man, look at these things, how God did it. He's like, listen, man, we came out of Egypt, we hit the Red Sea, and we freaked out. But here's what God did. He parted the Red Sea. He created a barrier. The God that can do that could help us solve this problem. And then they could have sought God for the solution. And then God was like, hey, listen, man, just chuck this stick in the water and bing, bada, boom. The water that was once bitter is now sweet. Right? They could have taken that past experience and they could have applied it to their current challenge. And they could have handled it totally differently. And then the next challenge, right? They're like, man, we need some food. But I bet the God who did everything else could help us solve this problem. And what if they sought God instead of complained, right? And then it's like you take that to your next one. It's like, okay, now we got this challenge. But no. We've built up all of these experiences of where God is taking care of us, where we're seeking out the solution, and He's answering us. He is giving us insight into what is the next step. I bet He can help us in this situation. If that was the mentality, then by the time they got to the promised land, they would have had the correct picture of who God really was. They would have had the correct picture of who they were. And they would have came out swinging just like Joshua and Caleb and says, listen, man, their protection is gone. We are more than able, more than capable to handle this. This is the momentum that they would have came to the promised land with. But because they didn't grow in this season of development, they disqualified themselves from actually being able to get in. Now that is clearly not going to be our case. So here it is, right? Sometimes the thing that God's calling us into is scary, but it's okay. We can do it. So here you go, right? This is where we are. This is the boundary of the promised land. This is where we want to go, but we got to freaking cross this, right? This could be sometimes the terror barrier, where it's like, what's scary, right? The Israelites bounced right off that thing and were ready to run back to Egypt, right? That's because sometimes the thing that God's calling us into is scary. It is uncomfortable. It is uncertain, and it is unfamiliar. But here's the catch. Crossing this barrier is where all your opportunity is where all your growth is going to happen. It's where you are going to develop into the person that you were created to be. And this is where you're going to double your talents. It's where you're going to do the work. It's where you're going to look at what I have, what do I have, and how can I turn it into more? I got to cross this line. And sometimes it's a bit of a process. But it's like, this is the very thing that we are called to do. We got to step into the thing that God is calling us into. There's this quote, and it says, you're either going to step forward into growth or step back into safety. It says, but there's no compensation for playing it safe. We're not talking about taking unsustainable risk. But what we're saying is that sometimes this is, for me, this quote has really been ringing in my mind for the things that I'm trying to step into. But it's like, look, you're either going to step forward into growth or you're going to step back into safety. You're either going to take that forward step or you're going to go backwards. You're going to keep doing the things that you've been doing, or you're going to step into something new. The new, man, it's sometimes, man, it's freaking scary. But it's okay. So here we go. We're going to wrap up with this right here. So this is the 3 ways to create momentum in life, right? Momentum is the strength and force that is created through movement. We're trying to create these experiences of where we stepped into the uncomfortable and it was beautiful, right? It's like we had good outcomes. It's not that there weren't challenges, but it's like we seek God, we got answers, we pressed and pushed and beautiful outcomes. Bam, that's an experience. That experience helps propel us forward into the next one, right? Where we're like, ooh, this next step's a little uncomfortable, but man, here's all this evidence that says God is with me, for me, and this is and if I'm going the direction He wants to go, He's going to help make this thing happen. And so it's pushing you past your comfort zone, pushing you into growth and development. So step 1 to create momentum in life is you gotta break inertia. Inertia is the tendency to do nothing or to remain unchanged. Israel wanted to go back to Egypt because they had remained unchanged. What they needed to do was realize and remember the good things that God had done and applied that to their to the terror barrier. But we got to do something, right? We got to step into the direction. We got to pick the direction, and then we got to come up, what are our couple steps? And we need to start taking some steps. 2, you want to cast off unnecessary friction. This is that thing we were talking about. He says, look straight ahead. Don't look to the right or to the left. Don't get sidetracked. You want to cast off unnecessary friction. You got to ditch these doubts and these fears. So we're not really considering how it's going to feel. We're not really considering, hey, is it going to work? We're like, this is the next step. Let's take it. If we take that, I guarantee we'll find the next step, right? This is what we're doing. Cast off that unnecessary friction, right? Because unnecessary friction creates unnecessary drag, which creates unnecessary fatigue, right? You got to cast off the inertia mindset of fear and doubt and second guessing. That unnecessary fatigue is that when you're marinating that it's not going to work out and that you're going to look stupid and all that emotional energy, man, just saps you. So we got to cast that junk off. We got to look at where we're going and move in that direction. And then step 3 is preparation, right? Taking time to consider where we want to go. What are these next steps? We create this plan and now it's like, okay, what am I doing today that's moving me forward? And it's like, man, as we continue to push forward, as every day we continue to take these steps, you will find that you are creating momentum in this area of life where you didn't have it before. And it is taking you into the future. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time,